Hey, sports fans, Larry Eder, RunBlogRun. This is our program, Socialing the Distance. We're with senior writer, ambassador of running on Staten Island, Jeff Benjamin, who has written with me since about 1880, 1890.
I think you're off by a century, but it is definitely
okay.
the last century, so that's for sure.
Was it? I'm trying to remember, because you started writing for American Athletics, I believe, in 1991.
Yeah, I believe the first piece that I ever wrote for you was the passing of Abel Kiviat.
Yes. Oh, my God, yeah. You had a killer picture with that, too. And
yeah.
I remember having met him at an event. God, it's got to be for 1984.
Yeah, probably right.
You know, and it, because I was at Runner's World at the time, and I went to an event in LA where he was there, but also, you remember he was known in Japanese as Kite Son. It was Kim Sung. He was actually Korean, and he won the gold medal in 1936 in the marathon. And I got to meet. I still have his autograph little note to me from back then. So
that is very cool.
I can be as geeky as you sometimes. What's been your favorite article that you've ever written?
Written a lot, Larry. You know, many years ago, I did the one on Marty LaCouri and Jim Ryan for you.
Yes.
And, you know, I got to spend. What happened was, you know, I used to do some things with the Roadrunners on a volunteer basis. And one of the things that a fellow named John Thorpe from New York Roadrunners would reach out to me and say, hey, do you want to pick so-and-so up at the airport? And I was like, they're coming in for like a race, Fifth Avenue Mile, marathon, whatever. I go, sure, absolutely. And it would always give me a break to get some stories. So Jim Ryan was coming in for the Travera Twosome, the 10-mile race to the 2-mile race, and I assumed Jim was going to be in the 2. And myself and Staten Islander Tom Cuff got in the car and jumped over to LaGuardia, and we spent a long time with Jim. And I did an hour-long video interview with him, which I have somewhere in my archive somewhere. I have a lot of video stuff, too, that is just like on cassette that eventually got to get it converted somehow. And it's a lot of people. And, you know, at that point, I know Marty LaCouri also, you know, from the area, of course, the Jersey guy, Villanova. And in 1991, I decided to do a piece on the LaCouri-Ryan rise, the rivalry, which culminated in that Dream Mile in Franklin Field in Philadelphia in 1971, which I still think was the last great mile publicized by media, television, and all that stuff. And, you know, as you know, sport back then was very different. You would have on like Why World of Sports on Saturdays from 4:30 to 6 o'clock, where they put on a variety of sports. And a year later, we invited Jim to Staten Island for a grand event, and he came. And we had a lot of people show up who weren't even runners or track people. They were just like, I saw him on Why World of Sports, and it was a football guy or like a baseball guy or, you know, something like that. And Jim transcended that, as we know, in that era, which is an era, you know, like with the sport we love to get back to these days. So.
No, I just recall, let's see, my first, the first TV that I watched about the Olympics was 1968 on a little black and white on my kitchen table. It was on a Saturday. Dad was making hot dogs for my brother Brian and I got to watch Bob Beamon do the long jump, you know? And I was really cognizant of the sport. In 72, I remember staying up all night after the Munich massacre. And then I read a story about Frank Shorter in a magazine called Sport. And I think Neil Admer did it, the guy from the New York Times. And it was the first time I had read about Shorter. I met him in 74 at the AAU cross country, and he actually spent time with me and 3 of our buddies, and he talked with us, which apparently is unusual for Frank. And he was the first sports hero that I got to meet. But that day I met Marty LaCouri, and I have this Adidas sheet with Marty's signature, and he had a red mustache at the time that he did handlebar. John Nino, Nick Rose, about 8 or 9. Oh, Neil Cusack, you remember? 2000.
Sure.
Yeah, was it 1973?
He won Boston, right?
Boston, yeah. So just that's when the geekdom began, But you've got to interview. So what do you remember from the Abel Kvyat interview?
Well, the Abel Kvyat thing is that we knew him. He was a former Staten Islander who had connections here locally. And for those of you who are not aware, Abel Kvyat was the first ratified IAAF champion at world record holder at 1,500 meters. So if you ever see the 1,500 meter record books, it starts with 1912, where I know at the Stockholm Olympics, the IAAF was created, and they put Kvyat in as the first. And he went to those games as a favorite for the gold medal, but got a silver in like a photo finish the first time they ever used the technology. He later won a gold medal in the 3,000 meter team relay, which is an event no longer run. And as I mentioned, we got to know him, as you did, because he passed away at the age of 99 in 1991. And at the time of his passing, he was the world's oldest living Olympic medal winner. And he was a roommate with Jim Thorpe, which I know we're going to get into soon as well.
Cool.
But Kvyat was also a Jewish guy who was the captain of the Irish American Athletic Club. In the early 1900s, the Irish American Athletic Club really didn't care who you are. They took everybody. And sadly, New York Athletic Club did not take everybody. A lot of other athletic clubs did not take everybody either. And the New York Athletic Club took African Americans, took Irish, Jews, everybody. Kvyat used to joke, though. He used to say, "You know why they made me the captain?" I go, "Why?" He goes, "Because I can get up Sunday morning and get those drunk Irish guys out of bed to get to church."
It was a different era, and it just and it's the neighborhoods. Like I grew up in a neighborhood that was Polish, Hungarian, and German, and the Irish families. There was an Irish kid that I hung out with. And then there's a Ray Smith and Raymond Skoski, and they're both still in St. Louis. And everybody lived in ethnic neighborhoods. You played stickball. There were bets on kids running down the street and stuff like that. And I know we mentioned Sebastian Coe. Seb is quoted as saying, "Sport is the most potent social worker in any community." Yeah, it's true. And what that means in English is that the sport is all inclusive. Yeah. You could be tall, short, heavy set, thin. There is something for you in our sport. And I'm sure almost all the athletes I've ever interviewed, when I asked them how they got started in the sport, they all pretty much said that they joined a track program where there were no tryouts. Basically, you showed up, you were on. Many were cut from other sports. The late Tom Fleming, my coach, who I miss terribly, would talk about Marty LaCour wanting to be a basketball guy in 7th and 8th grade. And Jim Ryan went out for Little League. And, Steve Scott was a baseball pitcher and would run with his mom 2 miles a day. And she finally cajoled him into trying track and field, Right. So our sport is so inclusive that you really meet everybody of all walks of life, all religions, all ethnicities, all creeds. And what brings us together really is the love of the sport, Cool. So you are a history teacher, correct? Yes. At junior high or high schools? High school. I'm actually at Neudorf High School, which is another Staten Island claim to fame. Neudorf High School, Charlie Marsala, Staten Island's only sub-4-minute miler, is a graduate of Neudorf High School. Bill Jankunas, who won the Olympic trials in '76 in the high jump, beating Dwight Stones. Wow. Remember we've done stuff on him.
And their coach, which is even greater, the legendary Bill Welsh, who in the 50s was a nationally ranked distance runner who won a 15K AAU championship, beating Ted Corbett. Wow. Finished in the top 20 in the Boston Marathon. And then to become a coach, and Larry, I think this is amazing, to become a coach. Yeah, you're a runner and you coach Charlie Marsala, but he also coached Bill Jankunas to jump 7 inches. That's cool. The transcendence of different events, different disciplines. And Mr. Welsh is still with us, 91 years old,
That's
Still gets
awesome.
out every day and does some working out. He stays away from people, obviously, because of the COVID, but I'm on the phone with him once a week or so, and always regaling all of us with these unbelievable stories from back in the day, so to speak.
Well, he was one of the old school guys like Sam Bell at Indiana who could coach all the events, and,
Right.
Bowerman was like that. Many people didn't get that he could coach sprinters and he could coach jumpers and he could coach throwers. He liked his distance kids, but now we're living in a time of specialization.
Yes.
And I think it's a little different. I want to talk about Jim Thorpe.
Sure.
It's a topic close to your heart, and tell our readers who maybe got dropped from Mars recently who Jim Thorpe is. Okay.
Well, before we do that, let's do a little cameo here. Let's see if I can get it. There is the shirt.
I want that shirt.
Yes, Bright Path Strong. Just Google it.
Okay.
Yeah. When we were kids in school, it was not unusual for us to learn about Jesse Owens, Jim Thorpe, Wilma Rudolph. I remember learning about that stuff in 3rd, 4th grade. You'd read biographies. And, back then there were these like sets of biographies, very small, very thin books, but you covered it.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, for better or for worse, in the world of education, the philosophy of teaching to the test has become very big, especially beginning in the 2000s. And Common Core, which I don't want to make anybody throw up, most people want to when they hear that, has taken precedence. With that stuff has come that these people that we have learned about in the last century are forgotten.
Mm-hmm.
So the great Jesse Owens was pretty much forgotten. Hollywood did a movie on him 4 years ago called Race, which did very well. It did really well, and it created a reawakening of Jesse Owens. And sometimes you see that with historical figures, like, somebody's really popular, and then they drop from the public conscience for 50 years, and it takes an author to bring them back, or a movie to bring them back. And Jim Thorpe was a Native American. His Native American name was Bright Path. He was born in the 1880s. He actually was born in the 1890s. I got to get this right, or the great author Bob Wheeler is going to kill me.
Yeah.
All right. But Thorpe, his father wanted him to go to school, but the schools were these Indian schools where their job was to convert them to Americanism, so to speak, which they did with the immigrants as well. Yeah. The Americanizing of the immigrants, and especially the Americanizing of the Native Americans. Okay. Thorpe would eventually wind up at the Carlisle School in Pennsylvania, where he excelled as a football player. And in that era, he played both sides, offense, defense. Getting a first down was different back then. He led the league in getting first downs, could play every position. And what happened was his coach was Pop Warner, who developed a Native American football team that was unbelievable. And perhaps their greatest athletic achievement was beating the Harvard football team before 50,000 people back around 1910. So these Native Americans, okay? Thorpe, his coach, saw in 1912 that there were the Olympic trials and the event, the pentathlon, which was a men's event back then, and decathlon. The story is that they came to Randall's Island, where the trials were being held, and after the first day, Thorpe, who basically never really did these events before in his life, had dominated them, that the officials said, "You're on the team. We don't even have to do the second day." And he was so dominant. It was almost like an earthquake force. Yeah. And Abel Kiviat, who made the team, recalls seeing Pop Warner putting Thorpe in the shot put circle, thinking that's where you threw the javelin from. And some of the Irish American athletic athletes were laughing, and they eventually guided Thorpe and stuff. And Larry Rawson, Craig Masbach, Dr. Frank Sarnowski, the great decathlon historian, have all said pretty much that Thorpe was just a natural. He was by our methods today, a visualizer. He would see somebody do it. He would watch them do it for about 40 minutes. And then he would do it, and they would say he did it better than anybody else. Wow. So he goes to Stockholm. Kiviat is his roommate in the steerage section of the boat. There are some theories about that, Thorpe being the Native American. the Hawaiian swimmer Duke Kawanamahu was put with him, and the Jewish guy were thrown in steerage on the boat, and they came over. From what we know, the Swedes really had some exceptional athletes.
Yeah.
Thorpe just rocked them, you know, and the point spread was so big. And then there's a story with that too, which has started to, get a little viral on the internet. Prior to the 1,500 meters, the last event, Thorpe went into his bag and his shoes were gone. Somebody had stolen. Okay.
Wow.
And the story is they went through the street, Thorpe with some teammates. They came across one shoe that was too big and one shoe that was too small. So, they used knives and they cut them and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Thorpe still set the Olympic record for decathlon 1,500 and won the gold.
Wow.
And there's a famous photo of Thorpe where you see him like standing with his USA thing. And if you look at the shoes, they have different shoes on his feet.
Wow. That's cool.
And there's irony with this as well. Like Theodore Roosevelt was a retired president who called Thorpe an American hero, which is ironic because Native Americans weren't even recognized as citizens of the United States yet.
Wow.
Until the 1930s. Thorpe came to a ticker tape parade in New York.
Wow.
Was lauded everywhere. Carlisle welcomed him like forget it. But then there were issues. The amateur code was very strict.
Yeah.
Basically, for our new people, if you were an Olympic level athlete and you had gotten paid in any way, shape, or form pertaining to your sport, you could be disqualified. After the Olympics, it didn't matter. But prior to it, if you did. So if Larry Eder was a great tennis player and wanted to go to the Olympic Games and he owned a tennis store selling tennis equipment, he wouldn't be allowed to go. Okay. Yeah. There are stories we know of other athletes like Wes Santee, who was allowed to take a watch for competing, but then he took a camera and the governing body banned him for a year. It's very hypocritical. And pretty much what happened was they dug up that Thorpe, along with a lot of his other Native American friends, played minor league baseball, in Iowa and these other states. Pop Warner sent them there to stay in shape. Almost every one of them used a fake name. That's how you got away with it, per se. But because he was Jim Thorpe and was already legendary before the Olympics, they used his real name. How much money did he get? Probably in today's money, about $50 a game for room and board, pretty much. So the U.S. Olympic Committee with the International Olympic Committee declared him a professional, and they took his medals away. And very tragic, very shocking. Thorpe, by the way, continued, though. He would eventually help create the National Football League. He was the first president, and I believe the MVP trophy is still named for him to this day. And he played Major League Baseball, and it was recently found out 10 years ago he played professional basketball with barnstorming teams in the 20s.
Wow.
He would pass away in the 1950s. The Burt Lancaster movie came out.
Saw that.
American. And Lancaster did some really great things. Burt Lancaster was a track and field athlete at NYU on scholarship, believe it or not, where he left the school to become a Hollywood movie star.
Wow.
And when he did the Jim Thorpe thing, he actually found Jim's address in a phone book, the old phone book, called him and invited him to the set. And Lancaster made demands of the suits in Hollywood. He said, number one, this guy's getting a consulting fee. Number two, I'm putting him in the movie. I want him to have dialogue, because when you have dialogue, you get more money. And number three is to be around the set no matter what. So Lancaster was really great with Thorpe. And the movie was a blockbuster hit and did very, very well. Thorpe would pass away a few years later. But the thing with his gold medals now leads to a gentleman named Bob Wheeler. And Bob Wheeler was a Syracuse guy, and somehow he got into the Jim Thorpe story, almost like a conversion. And he dedicated his life to writing the definitive book on Jim Thorpe to the best of his ability and fighting to get the gold medals restored to the family.
Wow.
And Bob and his wife, Flo, now keep in mind, there's no internet back then. Bob traveled all over the country, hitching rides everywhere, and he would meet Burt Lancaster. And he had no arrangement to meet him. He went to the gate at Hollywood. He pleaded. They let him in, and Lancaster spent an hour with him. He went to Gettysburg in the early 60s when former President Dwight Eisenhower had retired, because Eisenhower played against Thorpe in football. Eisenhower
my gosh, know that.
Yeah. And like I said, Wheeler really did this book, and the book is Jim Thorpe, that came out. There are a few other books as well on him, but the Wheeler book is the original tantamount biography. The book led to a movement, and Wheeler all the time lobbied former President Ford and finally President Reagan, especially during the '84 year with Los Angeles, where finally the International Olympic Committee gave Thorpe's family medals, gold medals.
Wow.
But the story is not over. Everyone always thinks it is. I thought it was. But to my great surprise, the International Olympic Committee has never changed their record books. They list him as a co-winner of the pentathlon and decathlon with the Swedish winners, even though his point spread is huge. And this is what's going on. So the Bright Path Strong is a movement that's being led by Bob Wheeler, Abraham Taylor, producer, a whole bunch of other people, where they're doing a couple of things. Number one, they have a petition going. They want to get a petition to the International Olympic Committee to restore Jim Thorpe as the legitimate record winner of the pentathlon, decathlon in 1912. Okay, that's number one. Number two, Abraham Taylor, I mentioned as a producer. Abraham Taylor, Flo Ridlon, Bob Wheeler have now worked with Angelina Jolie, where they are going to be doing a movie on Jim Thorpe. And you could say basically it's got to be due. I mean, the Lancaster movie was 1951.
Wow.
And when Abraham Taylor went forward to look into doing this movie, he wanted to do a tribute to the Carlisle football team. But then he
wow.
That's but then cool. He came to Carlisle. He saw, and by the way, the Carlisle today, the Army War College is the Carlisle school. The facilities are still the same. He came across graves of Native American children who either died there of disease or sickness, which was common back then as well, but also probably abuse. Yeah. And, Taylor started looking into this and is like, that college campus they show in Burt Lancaster's movie in 1951 is not what was really going on there.
Yeah.
If they needed to be brutal with the students to Americanize them, they did it. And so Taylor went back, lobbied with the Hollywood suits and said, we got to do this movie about injustice, the injustice of Jim Thorpe, but also the inspiration that he set, not only for Native American children, but for other people around the world.
That's cool.
So, from what I know, that's the goal of the movie. And the actor who's playing him is Martin Seinsmere, who the younger people may know if they see the HBO movie Westworld, the HBO show Westworld. He's the Native American in there who's painted white, who hunts the people down or something like that. I don't watch it. That's what I heard.
Wow.
And he's also, Denzel Washington did a remake of the Magnificent Seven cowboy movie with Chris Pratt a few years ago.
Okay.
The young Native American bow and arrow guy is Martin. So, and as I wrote for you in an article, Martin has experience with athleticism. He was a cross-country runner, a great basketball player, and he's training like a maniac at his home in Arizona to try to get ready for the filming of this movie. And when the filming will happen, we just don't know. The good news is that they could film in Stockholm because, as you know, the Olympic Stadium is pretty much the same. And they can film at the Army War College in Carlisle because that's the Indian school where the structures are still the same. But COVID and everything, I do believe they're doing script readings right now.
Okay.
So that's what's going on with the Jim Thorpe thing.
Cool. In 2010, I started going to Stockholm. 2011, started going to Stockholm. And I remember Chris Turner, who's now the director of the Heritage Group at World Athletics, took me down below the stadium and showed me the warm-up area where Jim Thorpe and Paavo Nurmi had both warmed up. And you could see the spikes, the big metal spikes that would go through there. So it was very, very cool.
That is cool.
And I remember the Burt Lancaster movie, watched it with my folks, and the stories of Jim Thorpe, and I remember that before the '84 Olympics because that's when it really started coming up again. And I'm happy that you've been able to combine your love of history, American history, and also athletics history.
Thanks, Larry, and I appreciate everything you've done with getting the articles published,
keeps
as well as the support I get from Abraham Taylor, Flo Ridlon, and especially Bob Wheeler, who has made it his mission in life to try his best to see if the record books will be changed officially.
Yeah.
So, we're going to see. It is going to probably involve Sebco also.
Oh, sure.
The good news is he's on the IOC now, which is great.
When did you meet Seb?
I met Seb at the Runner's World 25th anniversary function in New York City in 1991.
Wow.
And that was through the help of Mark Bloom, who, by the way, for some of you know, Mark Bloom is the great cross-country writer, the author of a lot of running books. And Mark was a Staten Islander. And also Joe Newton, who knew Seb very, very well. And I met Seb during that time. I met Peter Coe as well and his mom, Angela. Great people. And me being the geek, I had a poster for him to sign, which he did, and all this other stuff, which I still have. And, I said through the years on and off, I would read about him, see what's going on. And, when he became IAAF vice president a few years ago, he was kind enough to do that big article about how in '84, prior to the Los Angeles Olympics, he spent time with Joe Newton in York High School in Illinois, getting ready for the games. And Joe was still alive and, gave me some quotes as well. And one of the great things I'm very happy I was able to do, I got to see Seb again in 2016 in Rio at the Olympic Games. Joe had mailed me a York cross-country jacket. And he said, "Jeff, you better give this to Seb." Now, I'm cleaning up the quote because you might have G-rated people here.
Yes,
but Joe Newton, when he talks, you listen. Yes. So it was great that I was able to get it to Seb, and Seb always appreciated it. In the Long Green Line movie that was made, Seb is in there saying what is amazing is that almost everybody who ran on that program has been successful in some aspect of life.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Joe really got that into those kids over 50 years, Yeah. So, and I do talk to Seb, once every 6 or 7 months with an interview. And, it's really great when you talk to the stars of the sport, almost all of them are students of the sport. Like you can go with Frank Short or Bill Rogers to a track and field meet. You could sit with them and they know what's going on in the pole vault, the long jump, the high jump, like they know. And, that really is a tribute to them because you would think, oh, they only know about running, but that's not true. A lot of these people really know about all aspects of the sport. Like when they watch the triple jump, the high jump, the long jump, they really do appreciate this stuff. So.
I think that's one of the things that, I say after interviews this summer, I've been doing Zoom interviews a lot with athletes. And each one's kind of an example of someone who loves the sport, someone who has put a lot into the sport and continues to love it. And one of the topics we've discussed is the pandemic. How do you think athletics is doing in the time of the pandemic?
It's funny. I know you and I had this conversation. I liked what World Athletics, Seb Coe and his crew did with the meets over in Europe. Mm-hmm. They did borrow ideas, and I think some of the other sports stole ideas from them as well. Crowd noise, the diorama pictures of everybody in the stadium, things like that. I guess, we got to work with the tools that are given us. That's the situation that we're in. I find it upsetting, but not surprising that the Boston Marathon in April has already been postponed. Mm-hmm. So having said that, though, I've been interviewed on some of the podcasts, and sometimes people will ask me questions and they'll say, when do you think it will be over? But I'm not a doctor. I really can't say. And I guess, the one thing that we're all really looking at very seriously is, will Tokyo have the Olympics next summer?
What do you think? What do you think?
I don't know. Yeah. I really can't answer that. I really just can't. Could there be countries that refuse to show up because of COVID for the health of their athletes? That's a possibility as well. Would the Japanese not allow certain countries to come in where the COVID rate is really high? That's another question as well.
Well, that's on Monday on our program Athletics Chat. Your fellow writer, our European senior writer, Stuart Weir, who's based in Oxford, he was on an IOC virtual event last week, and he believes that it's about 60-40 that it'll happen in some way. The challenges to me are many. One, as you and I both know, our dear friends at the IOC and in various federations have sometimes an issue with reality. There's the issue that they want to happen, but what can happen? We're lucky to have several vaccines coming about, which I think is going to be a big deal. But how long will that take to get around? And Thomas Bach said the other day, gee, I sure hope athletes are put up at the front of the line in terms of getting vaccines. Well, we don't know, and it's I'm credentialed for Tokyo, and so is Stuart, and I'm kind of going, I can't go without a vaccine,
it's interesting you bring that up, because people like Thomas Bach, people like Sebco, people in positions of power, even in the political spectrum, world leaders, presidents, they don't like events to control them.
Yeah.
They do their best as they can to control the events.
Yes.
And COVID is an uncontrollable event.
Yeah. No. Did you ever watch that movie? Did you get to see that movie, Contagion?
No, but I'm scared to watch it now.
It's actually pretty well done, and it ironically was done in 2011. But the way they talk about the vaccines coming out, but it building up, it's a nice one to scare the hell out of you and have some popcorn. Did you watch most of the meets this summer on YouTube and on? Yeah,
as a matter of fact, the meets were on my sports channels. So,
okay.
Olympic Channel had them, NBC Sports had them, so I was able to watch some good stuff and things. And one of my favorite athletes is Gemma Rieke.
Yeah,
she is so competitive, and her range, she almost like a Sebastian Coe range now, like 800, 1500. You could probably even move her up to the 3000. Yeah. And I have been putting it off because I've been busy and he's been busy, but eventually I will catch up with Coach Andy Young.
Yes.
And I'm curious to know, because, boy, the Scots, Laura Muir, Eilish McColgan, boy, they are running fantastic.
Yeah.
And, and I would like to think that, I don't want to put words in Coach Young's mouth, but I think one of the things that a lot of the distance people miss out on is that concept of building the base, building the strength component first, Yeah. And, my best pal, my brother from another mother, as you know, is Rod Dixon.
Yeah.
And Rod was a big product of that.
Sure.
Just to give our audience a little thing, Rod ran 1,500 meters in 3:33. He ran the mile in 3:52. I think his 5K was like 13:11, 13:12.
Yep.
He was the world record holder in the half marathon, and would eventually run 2:08:59 to dramatically win the 83 New York City Marathon in the rain. Yep. And Rod did that over a long period. He found as he got older, his speed was leaving him, but his endurance was like exponentially getting better, And I have a feeling, I could be wrong, but I have a feeling maybe Andy Young is doing the same kind of stuff. But I don't want to put, words in his mouth. But I just see like how Eilish is moved up a little in distance, toyed with some things now. How Laura Muir even, I think, ran a 3,000.
Well, and you're right. Andy, at one time had about 50 athletes he was coaching, and all different levels, including young kids. And Gemma Rieke, he said, has always been, and she's been at the top of her game. He had to really develop Laura. Laura comes from a different viewpoint, and they're, training partners. And in fact, over the winter, because during COVID, were staying in the same house. So they could do training and stuff together. So it's a challenge, and hearing how athletes have overcome it. And it's just interesting to see which ones competed, which ones did not. And we're going to continue to see that, 2021's upon us, but we didn't have COVID in November, December last year.
Correct.
So how is that going to affect our indoor season? I want to see the Millrose games as much as you do. I'd love to be there, but is that going to happen this year?
That's a good question. Yeah, like I said, I don't have any. I have a lot of sympathy for Ray Flynn, man.
Yeah.
They really have big decisions to make, and they also have to follow New York City guidelines. And the decision might be out of their hands, so to speak. But it's funny because when I did talk to Sebco in April, he did say that, I said, what advice can you give, especially to the young athletes?
Sure.
And he did say, he goes, become students of the sport. You're going through a difficult time. If you think you're the only one who has gone through a difficult time, you should really read the biographies of stuff and things. Seb has always said that in '80 in Moscow, when he ran the 800 meters and got the silver, behind Steve Ovett, and he called it the worst race he ever ran. But he also remembers that, I remember learning about Jim Ryan, and had I been Jim Ryan in 1972, my Olympics would have been over. So he had a chance to come back in 1500. He was able to, I guess, compartmentalize that. Sure. And, I look at John Walker. John Walker, who I wrote about this past summer, as John Walker ran 3:49, the first man to break 3:50 for the mile. And then in '76, he won the gold medal. And then he had, I think, that compartment syndrome where he was out for 2 years.
Yeah.
2 years. Now, he already won the gold medal. He's world record holder in the mile. Why come back?
Yeah,
and
no.
He did. And he would eventually run faster than his world record mile, from what I know, right?
Yeah,
but it wasn't a world record, but Seb had it at that point. But, John went on to have, 100 sub-4-minute miles, the whole thing. And what made him come back? And I guess, for the younger athletes, even the elite athletes, you got to dig deep right now and say, why am I still in this? And the reason is that, you don't want to leave under these circumstances. You still have a lot to prove. And the motivation of proving something, I think, is big. So,
okay, we're down to 5 minutes, and now here's your challenge.
Okay.
I'm going to give you 5 athletes' names. You have 3 words to describe them.
You said no math questions. All right.
I know. Okay.
Go ahead.
Jim Thorpe.
Greatest athlete ever.
Okay. Lassie Viren.
Peaked on time.
Seb Coe.
Greatest competitor ever.
Rod Dixon.
Versatility, versatility, versatility.
Ray Flynn.
Loves our sport.
I'm going to give you 5 more because this is really
why not? Yeah.
Okay. Steve Scott.
Great competitive person.
Abel Kiviat.
Staten Island legend.
Fred LeBeau.
That's more than 3 words for Fred. Let me think. Always inclusive. Always inclusive. I'll stay with the 2.
Okay. Bill Rogers.
Greatest guy ever.
Frank Shorter.
Father of sport.
Joan Benoit Samuelson.
Gritty, tough, determined.
Mary Slaney.
Oh, man, I could use the same thing for Joni with Mary. So,
okay.
Dedicated, passionate competitor.
Of all times, what's the athlete you wish you could have interviewed, but because of the time-space continuum, you were not able to?
Well, I regret never meeting John Walker, although I did interview him by internet and email.
Okay.
Just through his wife, Helen, who was wonderful. Okay. I have never met and never interviewed Steve Ovett. Having
really?
said that, who is a media person, you probably are aware that's a difficult thing to do anyway.
Yeah.
Ovett has never been anywhere where I've been. Like the Runner's World 25th anniversary dinner that George Hirsch put on all those years ago.
Yeah.
God, I remember once again my friend Tom Cuff saying, everybody is here except for Steve Ovett.
Yeah.
Wow. And that was true, And the one year that Ovett was at Randall's Island for the Adidas Grand Prix, I was not there that year.
Wow.
So like ships moving in the night. However, though, having said that, I would never, I would like to think that Steve Ovett and I would have a great interview, just talk about the sport, about what he loves.
Well, we're going to have to work on that. I got to meet him with his son, and I have to say,
great runner too.
He was charming and thoughtful I just think that he has had a bad row with the press, which Seb did at different times.
Oh, forget it. I think in the 80s, I think the British press was the worst ever, Larry, from an outside looking in.
Yeah, they were pretty damn tough.
What they did to those people is horrible. But you know what? Seb and Steve shut them up.
It is. We're down to 2 minutes, my friend, and I just wanted to say how much I've enjoyed since, what is it now, 39 years or 29 years of dealing with you. I need to thank your wife and your daughters for being patient with me, because I know that you and I have driven them crazy, and I especially have driven them crazy. So.
No, but that's all right. But it's all for good. It's all for the great. We both love the sport, and the true nobility is that we're pursuing what we love, and to wake up every day wanting to do what you wish to do is a really cool thing.
Well, we're going to reserve a part 2 of this for before Christmas, so be ready.
All right. And I'll have the elf on the shelf behind me.
All right, my friend. And thank you again. It's really been a lot of fun. And this is Larry Eder with RunBlogRun. This is our program, Socialing the Distance. We've interviewed Jeff Benjamin, the longest writing person for American athletics, American track and field, RunBlogRun, a dear friend, a fabulous history teacher. I wish I could have taken a class with him. And he'll be writing for another 50 years for us. So, Jeff, thank you very much. And great job, buddy. Thank you again for
everyone. Please stay safe. Please stay safe. Thank you.
Will do. Hey, sports fans, Larry Eder, RunBlogRun. It's our program, Socialing the Distance. And today, this is the epilogue. And boy, did we have fun today. We interviewed our senior editor on the East Coast, the ambassador of Staten Island running, the one and only Jeff Benjamin, who is known on Twitter as Jeff Benjamin Run. And Jeff has written for my publications and websites since 1991. That is now almost 21 years or 31 years. And if I can count. And he is an American history teacher on Staten Island. And he's just a great guy. He is that combination of the fan, the historian, and the journo. He's covered some incredible topics and interviewed a plethora, you like that word? It's from Roget's Thesaurus. A plethora of athletes, not a pride of athletes, a plethora. And he does pieces. He's got to be at his 5,000th piece for me, especially considering all the stuff that he has written online. And I owe him about getting Brian Clay up. I think it's story 8 in the Jim Thorpe legacy. But on this auspicious occasion, Jeff spoke about Jim Thorpe, and you could see the love he has for his subject, the affection he has for Jim Thorpe, and the excitement in telling our readers about the upcoming movie. And he's a trained historian. He knows about contemporary sources. He has looked into it, and he puts that all into his stories. It's one of the things that I enjoy about Jeff and his enthusiasm. I believe it took me a few years before I got to meet him, but boy, he's a character. And his lovely wife and his 2 daughters have gone to Civil War sites with him and other historical sites, and they're frequent visitors to the Disney attractions. But you got to have something you like besides track and field. But today we talked about Jim Thorpe. We talked about Seb Coe and his relationship with Seb. He met Seb at the 25th anniversary Runners World Party back in 1991. And Seb has gone from being a fine athlete and 2-time Olympic gold, 2-time Olympic silver medalist in the 1500 and 800 to the leader of the global sport of athletics as the president of World Athletics. And about every 6 or 7 months, thanks to Jeff and Seb's largesse, we get some deep thoughts from Seb, which is pretty cool. Our friend Jeff has interviewed athletes from Abel Kvyat, the 1912 silver medalist in the 1500, and a real character, to Fred LeBeau, the founder and absolutely Willy Wonka of the World Marathon Majors movement. Quick Fred LeBeau story. In 1971, he pitched a major company in New York to be a sponsor of the New York City Marathon. Then it was 5 loops around Central Park. He wanted $5,000, and the guy turned him down. And in 1985, I met this guy. We had a drink together, and the gentleman told me it was one of his greatest regrets. He said that this crazy guy with a Romanian accent was gesticulating and telling him how running was going to go crazy. But in 1971, they had no clue. And in 1976, when they did the New York City Marathon for the bicentennial, it was only supposed to be around the 5 boroughs for the 1 year. Fred and Alan just kind of like... the reason why I love Fred LeBeau and Alan Steinfeld is because they're like my relatives too. My mom's theory was if you think you need to do something, you believe you do it, and then apologize later. And that's pretty much why I'm still getting in trouble in my 60s. Jeff is a little more taciturn. He is a history teacher, and he is a bit more cautious. But he is a fine writer. His enthusiasm on our sport comes out in everything he does. And he loves the sport, and he has a lot of fun. And I get these texts, Larry, can I call you? And all of a sudden I get a call from a guy in Staten Island with that lovely accent. And getting to spend time with him in 2019 at the Ocean Breeze Athletic Center, one of the places that he's most proud of, where the U.S. Indoor was, and the U.S. Indoor was taken away from them, which I still think was rather horse shit. But, that's, me talking because I don't know the politics behind it. And that's probably the thing that infuriates me the most, although I believe it was a Greek philosopher who said that there's politics in any time two humans interact. We still have the same issues. Right now I'm writing about UK athletics, and they just let go 4 of their 5 media people. Really great team, and I love the USATF team. And this team in Europe, these guys were amazing. The stuff they did for the media, the level of work they did, how they helped me over the past 10, 15 years. And I just think, again, I'll use my favorite Midwestern term, horse shit, that Joe Coates at British Athletics couldn't figure out how to keep these people on. Because, quite frankly, they gave legitimacy to a lot of times when British Athletics has done something stupid. And they're going to learn quickly that, boy, did they screw up that pooch. So I will get back on about Jeff. So Jeff and I just had a wide-ranging discussion. I did ask him to describe 12 athletes with 3 words. The one I forgot to ask was his dear coach and friend, Tom Fleming. Tom is a New Jersey guy and one of the finest marathoners, and great guy. And I've got an interview with him from 2014 that I need to post. It just breaks my heart listening to it, though. He was really a good guy. It's hard when you start losing the people that you care about, and but that's part of life, So, but Jeff and I will be around for another 90 years, and he's written for me since 1880, 1890, actually 1991. And he's a lot of fun, and I hope you understand how important it is to have people like Jeff in our sport. The Elliot Denmans of the world, Mark Blooms of the world, tremendously learned writers, and in everything that you read by them, you understand that they love the sport. And Jeff and I learned from those guys, and Jim Dunaway, and Kenny Moore, if you want to read a great book of short stories, read Best Efforts by Kenny Moore, or read Ron Clark's The what is it? The Loneliest Minute. I've got it on one of my shelves, and it should be just like poking my face right now, but I can't find it. I'll have to quote that later. But Ron Clark developed into an amazing writer, and you should check him out as well. But this is a thanks to Jeff Benjamin. Jeff, thank you for writing since 1991, which on further introspection is like 29 years. So that's a lot in writer's time, and it's 1,000 years in horse years, or runner's years. But Jeff, I hope to be around for a lot longer and to we'll keep driving each other crazy, and you guys will benefit from it. So this is Larry Eder, RunBlogRun, program Socialing the Distance. We just did an interview with Jeff Benjamin, and this was the epilogue. If you like us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We need more people to like us. And if you love us, subscribe on the YouTube, okay? All right? And also, stay safe. We're a week before Thanksgiving, and you shouldn't be flying. And if you do fly, you better wear a dang mask. And if you're going anywhere, you better wear a dang mask. And you better wash your hands for 20 seconds and wear a mask outside if you can't stay 6 feet separated. This is cold. This is a tough time. We've got to hunker down. And I'm sorry that you don't like it. There's a thing called reality. Sometimes people need to be a part of it. And I know I don't live in reality all the time, but, so what? Anyway, Larry Eder, RunBlogRun, Socialing the Distance, stay safe. And Jeff Benjamin, I love you, man. Thank you.